You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode.
Before we get started on this episode, here's a not-so-short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster nor the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak to a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's mold education courses, such as Mold 101 and the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit, by going to cnccontractorservices.com. Again, check out his mold education courses at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley, and we have my wife, Cassandra. We're getting closer and closer to summer and my birthday.
Oh, that's right. It's going to be, this is,
I
wow.
turned 30 this year.
You turn, how did somebody put it on Pinterest? You turn 18 plus 32. So you're an 18-year-old with 32 years of experience. How's that?
Most of us men don't care.
Yeah, the fifth decade of life. Here we go.
Exactly. Anyhow, today is another great topic. I hope they're all great. But today's topic is toxic mold after a flood or water damage, your 72-hour action plan. So when you hear that, like, what comes to your mind?
I mean, there's so many ways to have a flood in your basement or your house. So many ways. And it happens to people so often, especially when they go on vacation, which is why you always shut the water off before we go anywhere, even for a couple days. That this is a topic where I think people need to know, rather than panicking, what they should be doing those first 72 hours.
Yeah. And we talked about, like restoration companies. And for our listeners, we're CNC Contractor Services and is not a restoration company. We don't come in and do a mop-up, is what I call it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why our listeners, if they haven't listened, they don't know, but you know how I feel about certifications. But that's why, I don't go get a certification for moisture intrusion, which ironically, I've told you this, my parents bought a Rainbow International franchise, I was in high school or junior high.
Mm-hmm.
I actually went to a conference I don't know how old I was, but it was for water restoration and for fire.
Foreshadowing your future.
Yeah. But my point is, for our listeners, a lot of times you are going to be calling the franchise companies that are restoration companies.
Oh, yeah. And so really, talk a little bit about the different types of, whether it's flood or water damage that you typically see occur with people.
Well, there's different categories, and I've dealt with sewer backups. Okay. Remember that federal job?
Oh, that's right.
That ended up getting us a new trailer. There's just clean water. So that that was what we call it, gray water.
Would Shoshone be counted as a water damage?
Oh, of course. But that was not, that was what I would say is fresh water. That was a sprinkler line they had in the ceiling that broke.
Ooh.
Whereas Saratoga, the sewage one, it was on a federal project. So the engineer, or he's a biologist, they were gone for Thanksgiving and their septic tank backed up.
Ooh, okay.
So,
Okay.
but to kind of answer your questions, there's different categories and as far as what it is. So you could have sewage, you could have it mixed, which is gray, or it's just what I call fresh water.
Mhm.
And then there's different categories of how bad it is.
Okay. Or you can have a water heater blow, right?
Right. Which
And
would be
then
a clean water event.
Okay.
It's not sewage.
Yeah.
So when we're dealing with sewage, there's a lot more concerns.
Okay.
Like obviously all sorts of diseases and stuff that you can get.
That's true. Or could you have sprinklers on the outside of a house, like go crazy, and then that floods the basement?
Yeah. Yep. What I would say, and I'm sure our listeners are wondering this, like, what's the most common one? I'm not a restoration company, so I don't see that. Most of the stuff we are seeing is long-term issues.
Okay, so like leaks or roof issues that then have water seeping into the ceiling.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Whereas a restoration company, they probably see a lot of water heater issues.
Okay.
Water heaters have what's called the TPR valve, which is a temperature and pressure relief valve. Those over time, it's like a Watts 220 valve, I think is what it's called, or I don't remember. But it's this little valve, and over time they go bad. And the purpose of that valve, if too much pressure builds up in the tank, that pressure has somewhere to go so it doesn't shoot your water heater through the ceiling.
Okay.
Well, those valves go bad and they just literally start dumping water out. We'll talk about at the end of this episode, like preventative measures, but going back to what we were saying, water heaters is probably a hot topic. Sprinklers. Especially this time of year where more or less you have, and we've talked about it before, we probably should talk about it again, people that have flower beds right up against their foundation. Well, if you have drip lines in there or sprinklers, even if it's grass, those take a crap and then you have a basement that's flooded.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So when somebody thinks about a flood or water damage, what should they know?
So one thing to keep in mind, the topic of this was 72-hour action plan. So one thing I want to cover with the listeners is how long does it take for mold to start colonizing and reproducing? It depends on a lot of conditions, but it can happen as quickly as 2 days, 48 hours.
Wow. So it's the first 48 hours count a lot.
Yes. So it's very important to get it dried out.
So really in the 72-hour action plan, one of the first things you would say to somebody who's got a flood or water intrusion event is dry it out.
Get it dried out.
Okay. Get it dried out.
And that's normally where the restoration companies come in.
Okay.
I'll keep how I really feel privately. I won't say it all on the podcast, but in my opinion, a lot of the restoration companies drag their feet so that they get past that 72-hour mark, and then it becomes a mold issue.
Yeah, they have it
because it's financially advantageous.
Yes. So they string things along to get the mold to grow. So now they have another problem.
Yeah, I'm not saying they do it intentionally, but that's typically what happens, whether it's intentional or not.
It serves them.
Exactly.
So then really in the first 72 hours, you're telling people dry it up.
Exactly.
Then what?
Well, I kind of want to cover a little bit of drying it up. Like, you have to make sure you understand what materials are being affected. So if we're talking carpet and pad, you've got to get the carpet and pad and blowers underneath it to dry it up. If we're talking the base of a wall and it's sheetrock, they have, and I'm going to call it contraptions, but they have methods they literally drill between each wall cavity. So in between the studs, then they put more or less, it's like a fan that blows air into all these cavities. One thing you got to be careful with, though, is let's say you have a moisture intrusion event and you think going to a fan is the best thing to do. I would hesitate. And I'm telling our listeners, don't do that. Because if there is a mold concern and you just throw a fan in there, guess what you're doing with all those
spreading
mold
the spores, everything around.
Exactly.
The house. Okay.
So that's why, and I guess the easy answer is get a professional in there. But that's why it's really important to do things properly. The order of operations is similar, but it's not the same steps because every situation's unique. But you need to have a containment. You need dehumidifiers.
Okay.
There's a lot of things you need. Don't just go throw a fan in there. If you do that, that's probably the worst mistake you could make.
So somebody wakes up one morning and they realize that their water heater went kaput overnight and there's a bunch of water in their basement. What should they do first, second, third?
So is it a finished basement or unfinished? Or
Unfinished. Let's start with unfinished. Let's just say it's unfinished.
Yeah, so you can see everything.
Yeah, concrete, unfinished.
You should put a containment up at the bottom of the stairs with a zipper door in it. You need to put a dehumidifier in there.
Okay.
Obviously, the first thing you would do is address what led to the moisture intrusion. I kind of skipped that step.
Yes. Stop the bleeding.
Exactly. If it's the water heater, you've got to address that. If it's the sprinklers, you got to address that. If it's grading and drainage, like you got to stop the moisture intrusion to begin with. Then you want to get rid of the water.
Okay.
And if it's in a basement,
you shop vac it?
Well, we have these squeegees. You've seen them.
Oh, yeah.
There's a drain, or there should be a drain in every basement floor. Push it all to the drain.
Okay.
You want to be monitoring the humidity.
Mm-hmm.
From what you explained, if it's an unfinished basement, the most likely area that you would have mold concerns because of the building materials would be the walls where the stairs come down.
Yes.
Then you have the ceiling above you, which would be, the main level or whatever. Those are the areas you're going to likely get mold growth where there's cellulose materials.
Okay. So really, if it is an unfinished basement, that's a relatively easy
Very
process.
easy.
What if it was a finished basement with furniture and table?
Yeah.
What happens then?
Well, I mean, and this is why you call in a professional, but let's say the entire basement was affected.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was only one or two rooms, that's a little easier. But if the entire basement was affected, once again, you got to stop where the moisture's coming from. You've got to get rid of the water. Well, how are you going to get rid of the water? Well, they have extraction equipment, which is like a shop vac, but a lot higher powered. A lot of carpet cleaning companies have it. They're going to get rid of all the water in the carpets. Well, then you got to pull the carpet and pad up from the tack strips. You got to put blowers in. Once again, you have to do containment. So I'm not going the exact order. I'm kind of jumping around.
Okay.
But it would be similar, like containment, dehumidifiers, and things like that. But if it's fully furnished, you've got a pretty big mess on your hands.
Yeah, because you got to take out all the furniture. You got to get it.
Yeah.
It's just that.
And if you can't, like the couches, you set them up on blocks. Like,
wow.
Like it's an undertaking.
Wow.
And when we talk about the preventative measures at the end of this episode, that's why it's so important. Like we want to make sure it doesn't get to that point. Putting, like I already mentioned, dehumidifiers, the restoration companies have what's called water logs. So they log, what the humidity levels are, all that stuff. But it's really important to have humidity gauges too.
And it's important to have humidity gauges before a water intrusion event occurs.
Right.
Okay. And so then what are some of the common questions that come up around the whole thing of water damage?
As far as like what they should do?
Yeah. Like what do you think most people are thinking when most people don't expect a flooded basement or a flooded room, but when it happens, what are the most common questions you hear from people?
Does the carpet have to be tore out? Do we have to throw away the couches?
Carpet problem.
Our listeners know I am not a fan of carpet, period.
Oh yeah, that's right.
If I had it my way, there would be no carpet in a home, except for like area rugs.
Yes. Easy to remove.
Yes.
Okay.
But think about the carpet and pad, like that's a buffet for the mold. It's so porous and in such a large area and so much cellulose material. I personally would remove all the carpet and pad. I get it. Like people are like, well, but then the concrete floor is really cold, or put runners down, do something. But carpet and pad, if you don't at least get it all dried out, you're probably going to have mold issues. And the only way to know it's dried out is to tear it out.
Absolutely. So then besides things like carpet, what else should be removed when this happens?
Well, you should do, and once again, every situation is unique, but you should do a flood cut.
Oh, okay.
At the base of the walls.
Okay. Because you got to know what's behind the walls, right?
Yeah. And instead of what I was talking about earlier, the contraptions, but instead of them having to put those tubes in each wall cavity to dry it out, you just do a flood cut and then you have access to all of it.
Okay.
Because like the insulation, once again, if it's an exterior wall, you've got to roll the insulation up to make sure it gets dried out. Like there's a ton of steps, and I want our listeners to understand, like I'm not walking you through like every step and how it should be done because I don't know what all the conditions are, but a flood cut is important.
Absolutely. So when should somebody who's dealing with a flood or water damage, when should they call in a professional?
I would right off the bat.
Okay.
The good thing about that is, most of these restoration companies work with insurance companies all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they know how to word things. They know how to bill things. Most of the time, a lot of the stuff will get covered under your insurance. Because as you know, you mention mold and insurance is like, yeah, we don't cover that.
Exactly.
But if you call it water damage,
it's totally different game.
Exactly.
So then, a lot of remediation companies?
Restoration.
Restoration.
Yes.
Now, quickly explain to me, what's the difference between restoration and remediation?
Well, remediation just means you're getting rid of the problem. Restoration typically means you get rid of the problem and then you rehab it.
Okay. So both and. Okay. So restoration companies are the ones you call in the middle of the night.
Right.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons
that you don't have a restoration.
No, and as our listeners know, I specialize in mold.
Yes.
Restoration companies, they go do crime scene
mold,
cleanup,
fire, water.
All sorts of stuff.
Yeah, they do a lot of different things. So
it's just it's just not a road that I go down.
No, absolutely. But you're saying always call a professional in.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. So what should people not be doing when there is a flood or water damage?
Well, trying to deal with it themselves.
Okay.
One of the biggest mistakes we see, and I mentioned it earlier, they think that they can just throw a bunch of fans up. If you already had mold issues that you didn't know about, you're spreading the mold and mycotoxins everywhere. A lot of people don't open windows.
Yeah, circulation.
So everything's sealed up. That's why, and I get it, it costs more money, but that's why it's just best to hire a professional.
Agreed. Very much so. So then what are some preventive measures that listeners can take before something like this happens, or even if they're in the middle of something like this happening, to prevent mold growth?
Yeah. So obviously, let's just say a listener, they just had a moisture intrusion event and they're like, we don't want this to happen again. This is where I think for myself and my company, I specialize in this. So I would always be telling people, well, we want to prevent it next time. Mm-hmm. The restoration companies, I'm not saying they don't know, but they're not as familiar with all the preventative stuff.
Yeah.
So you mentioned it. We talk about all the time, humidity gauges.
Yep.
We have cheap ones. We have the Govies that are Bluetooth to your phone. There's all different types, but we want to make sure we're monitoring the humidity and it's always below 60%.
So humidity gauges. What about water alarms? Explain that thing.
So a water alarm is, and they're all different types and styles, but it's just this little sensor that, let's say in a basement, where would you most likely have an event? Probably in the mechanical room.
Yes.
So you set this little sensor up and you put it on the floor. Okay. So it just sits on the floor.
Okay.
It has some sort of alerting system that could be it's Bluetooth to your phone, or it has an audible alarm, which is the cheapest one. You can literally buy a 3-pack for like $20.
Okay.
Of just the audible alarm. When water hits it, an audible alarm goes off. And that's telling you, hey, I'm wet. What's going on down here?
Okay.
If you want to go even further, there is, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. So if someone's listening and they're like, well, Steve, explain that better. There's other episodes, so we dive deeper, but it's called a whole home water monitoring system. That's the contraption that you attach to your main water valve. It's always like Bluetooth to your Wi-Fi, probably to your phone. It will tell you if an abnormal amount of water is running through the meter or through the water line.
Do we yet have technology where you could shut off your water from a distance?
Those are.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Yes. That's
yeah, good. And you're talking, there's different brands out there, but I think, the big plumbing companies like Moen, they have them. And I think the setup is only, it's less than $1,000.
That's good.
But you have to have it installed, obviously, by a plumber.
Yes.
Yeah, it's what you just said. You could be in Europe and it'll alert you like, hey, there's a lot of water running through your main water line. You can shut it off right then and there.
See, that's really good, especially for people who have second homes or cabins where maybe you left the cabin and you forgot to shut the water off and you can do it remotely.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and when we talk about like winterizing properties, like you already mentioned it, even in the middle of the summer, if we leave for a few days, what do?
Yeah, you shut off the water.
Just because you just never know what's going to happen.
You never can tell. So then thinking about all of this, you've given a good 72-hour action plan of what people should be doing, what they should not be doing. What is your call to action for them?
To make sure that you have those tools we just talked about.
Okay.
And you can go as cheap as you can. I mean, for less than $50, you can buy a few water alarms and a few humidity gauges. Go get some and start using them.
There you go.
And pay attention.
Yep.
So if you're in the middle of a really bad situation, obviously I offer consultations. Just go to our website, cnccontractorservices.com. I think it's /consultations, right?
I believe so. But if you go to cnccontractorservices.com, you'll see all the things.
Exactly. The list that we talk about, all that stuff. So, all right. Well, we appreciate all of you. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If mold in your home has you up at night, wondering if your house is making you sick, it is time for a plan. With a mold consult, in other words, the mold environment assessment and evaluation plan from CNC Contractor Services, you will get a 90-minute strategy call with Steve Worsley, who will review your home environment, answer your toughest questions, and create personalized mold recommendations and next steps just for you. Don't let mold concerns take over. Take control. Visit cnccontractorservices.com to schedule your mold consult today so you can breathe easier in your home tomorrow.